Welcome to the Kingdom Podcast, featuring Commissioner Christine King, where all voices are heard.
Welcome to the Kingdom Podcast. I am your host, Christine King, Chairwoman of the City of Miami Commission and Commissioner for District 5. Today, our guest is Miss Edda Fields-Black, Pulitzer Prize-winning author of COMBEE, Harriet Tubman, the Combahee River Raid, and Black Freedom During the Civil War. Welcome.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
It's such a pleasure to have you, especially since you are homegrown,
Yes.
Miami native, and this podcast is about everything Miami, right? And I was with your mom when you received the award. She and I were we were being honored. We both received the Gwen Cherry Award, and she was a little late, and she had told me she was coming from Atlanta. You had just gotten the Pulitzer Prize, and I was just so excited for you.
Thank you.
That experience must be otherworldly. How was that?
Well, it has been otherworldly. When the announcement was made, I was in an airport. So I learned about it by watching the announcements on your phone, because they don't tell you in advance.
Oh, wow.
They don't even tell you if you're a finalist. You just won the Pulitzer Prize, out of the blue. I knew I had been nominated, but that was a year before, and there was nothing in the interim about my progress or my status. It's just been surreal. In some ways, everything has changed, and in other ways, absolutely nothing has changed.
Wow.
So we're enjoying it.
You worked very hard to earn that Pulitzer Prize, because it took you 10 years of research to write this?
10 years of research and a little bit, almost 3 years of writing. And while I was writing, during COVID, I was also researching simultaneously and working with, I assembled a team of research assistants, including several of my graduate students at Carnegie Mellon, PhD students. So researching very intensively in those last 3 years while I was also writing intensively.
Wow. What would you say was your favorite part of birthing this history lesson? Because that's what it is. It's a novel, but it's also a history lesson. What was your favorite part of that?
I think my favorite part was discovering the lives of the people, the enslaved people who were liberated in the Combahee River Raid, discovering their names, discovering their stories in the U.S. Colored Troops pension files. I wanted to tell the story of the raid from the perspectives and in the voices of the people who were freed. And I knew this hadn't been done before. I knew that historians didn't really have the sources to do it.
Right.
And that didn't stop me.
Well, I think you got.
looking.
I think you got that trait honest from your mom. By the way, I've mentioned her mother. Her mother is Dr. Fields, who founded the Black Archives.
Yes.
And her tenacity. I've also had her on my podcast, and born out of, she couldn't get a book on Black history from the library, and we have the Black Archives.
Yes.
So I think you got that honest.
Thank you.
So are you doing a lot of book tours? And
I have been on book tour now since January or February of 2024. And it doesn't look like it's going to slow down anytime soon. I'm having a little break now. We came down for spring break. But otherwise, I've been on the road steadily, and during Black History Month, Women's History Month, almost nonstop.
Oh, yes, that's exciting.
Thank you.
That is exciting. And at first glance, this is very intimidating because it's such a big book.
Yes.
Thankfully, I read on the Kindle,
Okay.
and I don't get to see how big a book is, and I just pour through it. This is on my TBR list for this summer. I think it's going to make fantastic summer reading on planes and just vacationing, where I can really sit down and enjoy it. What would be a favorite point in the story for you?
I think...
Or what was an eye-opening, because I know you know a lot about Harriet Tubman already before you wrote the book, but what surprised you?
What surprised me about Harriet Tubman, many things did. I would say the first thing that surprised me is that Tubman talked about her service during the Civil War. She was a spy for the U.S. Army. And she was sent down to Beaufort, South Carolina, to be a spy, sent down by the governor of Massachusetts. What surprised me is that even though she talked about her Civil War service for the rest of her life, the Civil War historians, the Civil War literature really dismissed her, right? She talked about it to her biographer, and she gave interviews where she talked about it, and they just dismissed it. And so I think one of the joys of COMBEE was finding independent sources where other people are talking about what Harriet Tubman is doing during the Civil War, sometimes in pretty stark detail, which filled a vacuum, right, that was not in the official military record. So being able to document what Tubman said she did.
Right.
And then being able to go back and say, so why didn't you believe Harriet Tubman, right? I think that is my favorite part about the research that I did for Tubman. The two parts, there's one part of the book, okay, this is a spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
The raid happens in part 3.
Okay,
so parts 1 and 2 are really the background of Harriet Tubman and the people who were freed, because I've got to get them to Beaufort. They don't start off in Beaufort.
Right.
She's in the Maryland Eastern Shore. They're on the rice plantations. So you have to learn about what their lives were like. And another thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to put the reader in the rice fields. You know, I wanted people to understand how deadly those swamps were.
Yes.
And how deadly it was for our ancestors to be forced to grow this crop. I wanted them to know about the environment, and about the rice growing and not just the mosquitoes. Everybody thinks about the mosquitoes and the malaria. Malaria is very important. But also just the snakes, right? So in that morning when the gunboats arrive at 4 a.m. and the freedom seekers are hoeing rice at 4 o'clock in the morning, I want you to have some idea of the hardships they've experienced, even walking a mile from the slave cabins to the rice fields in the dark, through grass that's infested by snakes, standing in the rice fields in the dark. I keep saying that. And the water in the fields it's just infested with alligators. Right?
Terrifying.
Terrifying.
It's terrifying.
And they're hoeing rice. And to think about, just all of these hardships and all of the death and all of the sickness, and especially the deaths of their children, so that when they first feel the vibrations and smell the smoke, and then they start to see these U.S. Army ships and hear their whistles, and they know that freedom is coming for them, right? They know it's freedom and they know it's coming for them. You're really rooting for them.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
To get on the boat.
Almost like a thriller.
Yes.
It's like a thriller. Because
Yes.
I tell you, you lost me with the snakes. You lost me with the snakes. I mean, and we take so much for granted. I was out running one day, and I saw a snake. I swear I jumped as high as a tree. One little, I guess it was a garden snake. It was a black snake,
Okay.
right? And I screamed, and I couldn't imagine in the dark, through the water, snake infested.
And you couldn't imagine that your children, right? So you could be in a rice field with other women, but your children who were old enough to work would be in a separate rice field, tens of yards away from you. Totally separate field.
Oh, no.
So people, tried to argue with me and said, well, the men became alligator hunters. Some of them did. That's another story. But what about the children who are by themselves and who would be completely vulnerable to the alligators in the dark? One of my favorite things about writing COMBEE was we did a lot of reenactments. I was in residence on the Combahee River at a private research center for 18 months. I'm writing during COVID now, so I didn't have to teach. Well, that's not true. I didn't have to teach in person. I was teaching online. So that gave me more flexibility to travel, and I would go down for 18 months, 10 days out of every month. And I'm a hiker and a walker, so I would hike the rice fields
in the dark,
and the river. No, not in the dark. But there were still, they are still teeming with alligators.
Oh my gosh.
Right, there are alligators all over the place. I got to know most of the planters, all except one, the people who own the plantations today, and they gave me full access to their properties.
Oh.
So I could go and walk and really trying to map the historical sources that I was reading, sources that were written at the time of the raid or right after, try to map them onto the landscape today so I could figure out where and how things happened and how freedom seekers got, say, from the slave cabins to the rice fields, from the rice fields to the river, on each of 7 plantations. In hiking, I got to study over 2 cycles the critters and the vegetation. So I saw the mothers lay the eggs. I saw the eggs hatch. I saw the little hatchlings run after their mothers, and then I saw them run away from their mothers, and then I saw it again. So I really got to know the ways of the alligators.
And to be able to walk the same path.
Yes.
Did you feel the spirit walking?
I did.
That must have been quite an honor.
It was very, very, very powerful. And in the course of the research, I learned that my great-great-great-grandfather, Hector Fields, so this is my paternal, my father's father's side, was a soldier in the U.S. Colored Troops, and he fought in the Combahee Raid. So he was in the regiment that fought in the raid, and we didn't know this before I started the book. So I felt like I was walking in Hector Fields' footsteps.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's pretty special.
Yeah, that is. That's goosebump special.
Yes,
it's
is.
Goosebump special.
Thank you.
Wow.
So for your beach reading, I would say my favorite chapters are chapters 13 and 14, because here you have one of the Combahee slave owners. His name is Joshua Nichols, and he happened to have been on the plantation the morning of the raid. He was asleep when the U.S. gunboats arrive, and one of the men he held in bondage woke him up. He barged into his bedroom and woke him up at 5 a.m. and said the U.S. Army is here. And he talks about what happens to him in chapter 13 as he tries to convince the people he holds in bondage to follow him to the woods and hide, and they all go to the boat. And then chapter 14, you read about Minus Hamilton, who, with Harriet Tubman as the star of COMBEE, he's an 88-year-old enslaved man who told his story of what happened to he and his wife the morning of the raid. And they're almost like mirror images.
Wow.
Because Mr. Hamilton tells us the overseer told us to go to the woods and hide, and we ran to the boat, right? He talks about how he wished he could go back to the slave quarters to get the only things he felt like were his, 2 blankets, but he couldn't. He talks about seeing black soldiers, young black men in U.S. Army uniform for the first time. He is in awe of these young men like Hector Fields, who came to give him his freedom. And finally, he's telling a story to the commander of the 1st South Carolina Volunteers, who's an abolitionist from Boston. And the commander must have asked him, well, how did you feel? Right? How did you feel watching everything that the slave owner, the person who owned you, everything of his going up in smoke? And when I read this, I was like, how often do we get to know how enslaved people felt?
Right.
Right?
Right.
And he says he didn't care at all. He said, everything is burning. The young men came, they held their heads up, and they set it all on fire. And he didn't care at all. He was going to the boat. It's such a powerful, powerful, powerful testament.
I can't wait to read it.
Yes, Minus Hamilton.
I cannot wait to read it.
Thank you.
So I'm going to ask you some other things, like some young people watch this. How did you fall into being an author? I know you're a professor at Carnegie Mellon.
Yes.
How? Because this isn't your first book.
No.
You have a couple of books.
I do.
So how did that process? What is your process?
That is an interesting question. So I think in many ways, I always wanted to be a writer. And as a child, I tried at various points to keep a diary. Keeping a diary, I was not consistent about it. I had a couple, but I didn't keep up with it. What I did do is have a notebook. And I tried to write a little bit every day. And I don't know, I can't say that I did this for 18 years or how many ever years, 16 years. But I had notebooks, and I would make an effort, to write something every day and to develop a writing practice. I loved writing in high school, and my favorite subjects were English and history. So I went to Emory University as a joint major in English and history, kind of like a double major, but it was a little bit different. It was a joint major. And while I was at Emory, I started working for newspapers. So for the main campus newspaper, I was a copy editor. And then I started writing articles, more opinion pieces than news stories. And so I had a little column that I wrote for the main campus newspaper. And then one of my classmates approached me, and we ended up founding a Black student newspaper called The Fire This Time. And we were the editors. We did everything. I mean, we would recruit other people to write, but we also wrote, we fundraised, we did everything for this little newspaper. And that really, I loved it. This is where I'm really developing my love for writing. While I was at Emory, pretty early on, I decided that I was not going to law school and I was going to be a historian.
Oh, wow.
And I was going to be an academic. I was going to be a history professor. And part of what appealed to me about that was the teaching, yes, but it was the writing. The fact that I would have to write, I would be expected to write, that would be part of my job, would be to write history. And I can't say that I knew exactly what all of that meant, but I was excited about writing. Fast forward, my 2 previous books were both written for academic audiences. And that means I'm writing for my graduate students
Right.
and my colleagues who are specialists in my field. And so they're not meant to be for the general public.
I get that.
As I started researching COMBEE, I very much wanted this book to be for the general public. So then it becomes not only doing the research and finding the sources, but learning how to tell a story.
Yes.
And I had, in trying to decide this, because this is not what academic historians are trained to do, you know. It's not what you learn in graduate school at all. And some people even look down on it. They think it's lesser when it's actually a higher skill. You're actually doing more work.
Right.
So I started trying to learn about the writing craft, going to creative writing and nonfiction writing workshops. My children will tell you I went to summer camps a couple of summers with different writing, what do you call them? Writing festivals or writing those kinds of things. Yes, I went to several of those. I also started working with artists. So I have an artistic collaboration called Unburied, Unmourned, Unmarked Requiem for Rice. And it's a symphonic work in which I've collaborated with John Weinglass, who's a 3-time Emmy Award-winning classical music composer, to create a symphonic work about rice and slavery.
Oh, wow.
So it's working with people like John. It's working, I consulted for the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, the International African American Museum, the Senator John Hines History Center. So museum curators, artists, performing artists, visual artists, people who tell stories, and creatives, and they tell stories in different ways with different media. And it's interesting, I found most of them actually do research. So we were very complimentary.
Oh, nice.
Very complimentary. And I also work a lot with scientists. And so I go back to my residency on the COMBEE at the Research Center, and the group of scientists that I work with, ecologists, biologists, and archaeologists, soil scientists. And so really, on the one hand, looking at the environment in a very different way and trying to put the reader, as I mentioned, in the rice fields so the reader could experience it with all of their senses.
Right.
Became an important part of my process, an important part of helping me to write this story for a general audience versus writing it for an academic audience.
Right, and I can't imagine, you really would have to experience that to be able to write about it.
Yes.
You couldn't just read, to give us the whole story. What are you reading today?
I'm reading 2 things, which is always dangerous. No, I'm reading 3 things. So I have a steady stream of books these days that people have asked me to endorse. So I have my endorsement that's due on the 15th of April, the latest one. I'm introducing, and that one is about William Still. the abolitionist in Philadelphia, the big abolitionist, who wrote down the stories of people who were coming through Philadelphia on the Underground Railroad. And this is his niece, great-great-great-grandniece, I believe, who's written his biography. So I'm reading that, and then I'm reading John Edgar Wideman, because I'm representing Carnegie Mellon at an event on April 10th. And I probably should have listed that first, because that deadline is first.
Yes.
I've got to finish that first.
Yes.
So I'm reading Wideman so I can write his introduction for the April 10th. And I'm reading Octavia Butler. I'm reading Kindred right now.
Oh my gosh, I read that.
Did you love it?
I absolutely, I could not put it down.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved that story.
Yeah.
It was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Yeah. I read The Sower. What is it? Her most famous book about 2024. I don't know why I can't remember the name of it, but I read that in 2024 towards the end, and then I bought all of these Octavia Butler books, and I've gotten sidetracked because I just have all these other responsibilities. So I said, I'm getting back to my Octavia Butler.
Yes, no.
And then the deadlines start again.
Kindred
but I can't wait to get back to
Kindred
it.
is a phenomenal story. Phenomenal story. I'm so happy that you have joined me on my podcast. I pray that everyone picks this story up. Put it on your TBR list, and that, for those of you that aren't readers, that's the to be read list, because this is definitely my summer read for this summer. I'll get through it. And you are such a phenomenal guest.
Thank you.
Your story is so inspirational. If you could tell your younger self, give your younger self advice, what would that be?
Wow. What would it be? I would tell my younger self, focus on what God has in store for you. My younger self spent a lot of time chasing and crying and trying to hold on to things that were not for me. Not realizing that there was something else that I was supposed to do. And to focus on finding that thing versus trying to keep this thing over here that God is like, okay, I'm going to get this out of the way because she's not paying attention. She didn't have time for all that. She needs to be over here. And I'm like, no, I want this. Let it go.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
This is another episode of the Kingdom Podcast, where all voices are heard. Join me again for another episode of the Kingdom Podcast. Thank you again, Dr. Black.
Thank you for having me.